Okay, so today is April 25th, and this is another SIG CLI meeting. My name is Maciej, and I'll be your host today. A quick announcement for what's going on. We started officially yesterday 1.11 feature freeze, which means all the features that are planned for 1.11 should be already filled in the features repo. From the email that Josh sent out 2 days ago, he will be publishing the list of the feature items shortly as a Google spreadsheet. Additionally, next week, I'm hoping to see at least some of you at KubeCon in Copenhagen, Denmark. We are doing their SIG CLI sessions. I can't remember specifically, but I see Sean is on the call. So Sean, can you remind me when exactly are the SIG CLI sessions?
So the SIG CLI sessions are on Wednesday and Friday. The intro session is going to be facilitated by Munchie, and the deep dive session will be facilitated by Phil. I believe I'll update the doc, but I'm pretty sure that the times were 11 a.m. on Wednesday and approximately that same time on Friday. I'll update the doc.
Perfect. That would be very cool for those of us that are heading to Copenhagen. Does anyone else have any other announcements that I would like to bring up? Okay, hearing none. So the next topic in the agenda is test grid. I think Phil, you added that one to the agenda. You want to talk about it?
So actually, I added that to the agenda. This is Sean.
Okay.
So we were thinking that this we'd try it. I would try it this particular meeting to see if we can get into the habit of looking at the health of the project at the beginning of the meeting. And so I had a look at the test grid, put a couple links in. Currently, there's a lot of flakes that started yesterday around 4 p.m. Pacific time. And so I'll nominate myself to dig into that and to resolve it, if that's okay.
Sure. And actually, that nicely goes with another topic that I want to bring up. So during the last session we had 2 weeks ago, first during the retrospective, we talked about focusing on flakes, and then Menchi also proposed having a on-call rotation for monitoring flakes and especially addressing those. So I propose that we talk with SIG apps, because apparently they were also discussing this topic. So I reached out to Matt Farina. He's one of the co-leads for SIG apps. He mentioned that they were discussing this topic, but nothing actually came to fruition out of it. So Menchi, can you tell me if your proposal about setting up the on-call that you sent it out to me last time, are you still interested in setting it up, and we can slowly start actually implementing the flake rotation duties?
Yeah, I'm still interested in that. Do you think it will be necessary to have a proposal for that?
So no, well, it's rather, I think it's something that we are internally using for us. So I'm fine with just, we just need to inform the entire SIG CLI. So sending out as soon as you set it up, we need to document either through email or additionally, maybe during the next call, we will go through how it is set up, where people will find this the information, how you sign up for the on-call, who's the current on-call, etc., so that every single person within the SIG CLI is aware how this is working and where to get data and how to help with this, and eventually maybe somehow the responsibilities. I would start with maybe some basic rules to start with to get it working. We'll see how this thing is working during the 111 closing that will be happening in the next month. So we'll see more or less how this is working, and then we will be able to eventually document it better and propose the same tool for other SIGs, I think.
Yes, that sounds good. And so do you have some specific on-call tools you want to use, or we can use the tools that I mentioned last time?
You can let's start with the one that you mentioned. I think I remember, and I was asking Matt Farina if I remember correctly. He also mentioned me the same tool, so
Okay.
I'm fine with that. Please leave a link. I don't have it currently handy. Please leave a link to that to the project and the agenda so that it's visible for everyone else what we went with.
Okay, I will update doc.
Cool, awesome. So, Sean, going back to the test grid topic, you're basically proposing that we set up some kind of a set of links that people can, or we will go through on every single SIG CLI at the beginning of SIG CLI meetings and verify the current state of the queue and the project. That's basically what you were hoping to get to achieve with this test grid topic.
Yeah, I was just hoping to kind of get the ball rolling with this on call as just an informal. Here's what the test grid looks like. I'm not sure what the community thinks about how to organize that, but I thought that we'd just get it rolling if that's okay. And then I'd nominate myself to, if you guys agree, just to dig into these issues. And in the future, whoever is on call can, either say it's green or red or give some other status, just as a 2-minute update at the beginning of the meetings, and to keep the community aware of the health of the code base.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly, and the role of the on-call would be a perfect place for somebody to give this update to all of us. Okay. Are there any other topics around the test grid or the on-call rotation for addressing flags? Because I have another testing related topic that I want to jump into. If there are, unless there's something else that people wanted to discuss before going further. Okay, I'm hearing none. So I went through over the past couple of weeks. Both Juan and I, we spent a lot of time going through all the kubectl commands while implementing the printer flags and trying to unify the current usage of flags. And what struck me several times is that we are testing different parts of code in very non-unified way, up to a point that we are one example that struck me the most was that we were using fake printer, and the output of the command which just printed that object X was created, was what the test was checking. It did not check whether the correctness of the object created that was in the create commands. It only checked whether the command run and the output was that, I don't know, a job was created, which I think is very wrong, because we are not testing the actual functionality of the command. We are not testing if the parameters that were provided by the user are actually producing the object that we expect the command to be producing. I'm hoping that throughout the next couple of weeks, I'll try to write down some kind of a guideline for testing CLI. This will go into several pieces, because as you probably all know, we have different levels of tests. We have unit tests, and these should be written in such. First, we need to modify the code that we have in such a way that it is unit testable. So I'm hoping for the create as an example that we will be able to verify that the generator that we are using is actually producing the object that we expect from the input parameters. I would be very cautious with testing the printing output, because I think the output, we never said that the output of the kubectl commands is stable. It will be changing. The majority of time it will be slight changes, but I don't want to hard code tests that will be exactly counting this number of spaces between object X and object Y in the output. Additionally, so I would like to describe in a doc what should be unit tested and how code should be written in such a way that it is unit testable. What kind of tests should land in a test command, because obviously we have a test command that will be verifying overall correctness of the commands. I doubt we have any kubectl related integration tests, but we do have several of E2Es, but they are more as a feature plus an actual CLI behind it type of a test. So if anyone has any ideas how we should approach this topic, please reach out to me. I'll be very happy to answer your questions or to gather some additional feedback around the topic. And I'm hoping to come up with some document that we will be reliably showing to every single kubectl developer, so that we will be able to limit the number of flakes and have the test actually verify the functionality they should be. Does that make sense? Awesome.
One question, how does that impact the version skew test?
The version skew test, I haven't thought about it yet, but yes, we need to ensure that the version skew tests are handled separately. But what do you mean? How this addresses the version skew test? Do we have? Go ahead.
I just meant so everything you're saying sounds great. I totally agree. More unit tests and consistency and making sure we're testing the right things. We do have version skew tests, which right now are EDE tests, and make sure that skewed versions of the client and server work together. As we increase coverage with unit tests and make those better, do we need to make sure that everything that we're testing for correctness of the tool is also represented in EDE tests that can be done with version skew as well?
I'm not sure if we'll be able to to have everything tested in the versions queue, but I would like to see some of the major areas, the major pinpoints, be tested in the versions queue. If that means introducing additional E2Es, yes, then we will do so. But explicitly testing everything for the versions queue, I'm not sure. We should go with this one. Maybe not at least now. We should try as hard as we can. But I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% sure that everything has to be needs the queue tests.
Maybe it would be sufficient then if we just like document what we've tested and not tested, and then develop an SLO for what works with version queue and doesn't. And so anything that's not tested is out of our agreement.
That's reasonable, or at least explicitly say, I don't know if that does make sense. For create, for example, testing every single create command in the versions queue test, I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Create for some available, like the new create won't. So
yeah, the new create that you will be working on is definitely something. But then again, if we manage to create a limited set of tests for create commands, that's fine. I'm just saying that not every single create command has to be tested. Obviously, that there will be commands that are introduced over time that won't work in the older versions, and that's perfectly fine because some resources are not available or are in the different versions, and I'm perfectly fine. As a good example of stuff that should be tested with multiple for the versions queue is those resources that are interacting with resources that were promoted from one API version to another one, moved from one group API group to a different API group, or promoted from alpha to beta and beta to GA. So if we test at least those, I think we should be reasonably good about the versions queue. And if there's no such move, I don't know, create pod, obviously I don't think we would have to test pod, because pod will be working all the way back a couple of versions. Phil, can you tell me? I think I've searched several times this topic, and I never was able to find a proper doc. Do we document what is the current versions queue guarantee that we provide with kubectl? I've always heard about +1, -1. Was it more?
I think it might be like in the API machinery docs someplace. We do document that. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, that would be cool. If you find it, please link it in the agenda. I do remember that I was trying to find it several times, and I was never able to find it reasonably. Maybe we should introduce a separate doc for where we describe the testing guidelines and the testing objectives, and the same way within those tests we will provide the information that this is the versions queue guarantee that we provide within the kubectl, and this is the testing guidelines that we are trying to follow to fulfill that requirement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, different
Cool.
commands may have different guarantees too, even.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
If I find I think I found the doc. I'll put it in the chat once I read it and make sure this is it.
Okay. Awesome. So basically, that's it. This is definitely something that will take a couple months before we are ready, and then we will be able to actually reliably provide this to all folks.
So
Awesome.
I have one
Sure.
comment related to the testing. So before we have everything, we only have unit tests and the E2E test. And now we have integration test library, and we can leverage that to make our test can be run faster. So I mean that we should suggest all the new E2E tests should be like right in that using that library right into as a integration test. And if we have time, we can migrate all tests to the integration test.
Actually, we have unit tests, we have test command, and we have E2Es currently. I'm not sure if we have any integration tests, and I'm not sure if integration is a good place for the CLI stuff. The unit tests are perfectly fine because they are focused on white box testing particular bit of functionality. The test command take a broad approach on a specific command, similarly to how E2Es, and additionally E2Es are helping us for the version skew testing. Not sure if the current integration tests that we have are sufficient because yeah, but I can be persuaded differently. But the current approach that we have, I'm not sure if integration is a good place for any CLI testing.
So I think I may have a slightly different opinion. So I guess we don't really need a full cluster with a lot of nodes to run the CLI test. What we really care is the master node, the Kube API server, and the schedulers. So I believe the test framework already can mark that behavior. So we only need one master node to do all these tests. We don't really need to fully function like a 3-node cluster to do this test. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, I can agree with that one. But then again, does integration falls under the category of the tests that are run for the version skew? I don't think so.
Oh, right. That one may not work well with version skew. I'm saying that for other non-version skew tests, we can leverage that.
Yeah, but then again, we have the test command that are perfectly fine. Not sure how much of the server, but I think the test command are setting up a limited server as well, and they're perfectly fine for the majority of tests to verify the test is working as the command is working as you imagine it to be working. So instead of going all the way to the integration, the test command is actually sufficient. I'm not saying that the test command that we currently have is perfect. It's just that I'm saying it's sufficient. And sometimes for kubectl commands, it's easier to write tons of bash for testing the functionality rather than going to the integration, which will be mimicking a lot of the kubectl invocations.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, but I want to see that the test CMD script, sometimes it's not easy to maintain, and some tests I don't believe belong to us because some feature tests that belong to other SIGs, I guess. Right. And
yeah, we can discuss. So in OpenShift, we solve this problem with the test command in a way that we split the entire, because we used to have it in a single file. Currently, the test command util, I believe it's 3,000 lines or even more, or close to 3,000 lines. So it's pretty big, and it's definitely hard to navigate through this file, figure out what belongs where. So maybe the solution for us is to actually split this this monolithic file with all the testing into a set of smaller, more finer grained tests for specific area of kubectl.
I'm sorry, I can't. I don't know if someone already said this, but the folks, some of the folks from Pivotable working in SIG testing built a framework in Go that provides a lot of the utilities that the test command.sh file has as bash functions. And I think they're working on taking those, breaking up that file and putting it into the Go test framework so that it's run with Go test and looks like the rest of our tests.
Yes, that's the library I want 2.2.
Okay. Okay. So that's a thing that I wasn't aware of. Does any one of you have, I don't know, a link to the discussion to project, the library they are working on?
It's a project under Kubernetes SIGs called Test Framework. I can put it in the chat.
Okay, that would be greatly appreciated. I'll then sync with the SIG testing folks before proceeding with this one in that case, because I think that's reasonable to loop them in this, because that somehow overlaps the functionality. Yeah, that would make sense. If the SIG, the test command would be entirely rewritten with this new framework, then that's fine as well.
Yeah, it's actually quite nice.
Oh, cool. That's good. That would simplify, because I know that the test command sh is a big problem. I just recently fixed it slightly to be able to for it to report multiple failures, all the test failures, rather than a single one at a point at any point in time. Because going through the entire log is problematic. Does anyone have any other opinions, topics about the testing approach that we will be taking over the next several weeks or months even?
How big of an initiative is this?
In I don't know, in whatever, in time or in person, or not sure how you want to see.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, like, how many folks will be working on this, and how is it being staffed compared to plugins or whatever else we have going on?
I think this will be a sidetracked stuff that Juan and I will be working slowly towards with. We will probably start with gathering some requirements and coming up with a proposal, and then we will let the entire SIG CLI know about the fact, and then we will just wait for the input. And basically, yes, we are open for any input from anyone, or especially help either with writing or the document, or with actual work that we will be doing afterwards while cleaning the tests.
Awesome. This is hard work. Thanks for grabbing it by the horns.
Cool. Okay. I think we can, in that case, we can move to the next topic, which is the kubectl edit. Juan, can you, because you've added that one to the agenda, can you shortly describe this? And then I'll probably, I think Phil left some comments in the topic as well. So I'll let the two of you speak up.
Sure. So this isn't a sort of a major proposed feature, but I've come across it multiple times in the past. So the PR that's linked on here is basically a PR that Brendan opened a while back, trying to solve the issue of, basically given a config map with a file embedded as the value of one of the keys, how do you edit that file, in a humanly possible way? So, while the PR that Brendan opened had a valid idea, the implementation was ultimately reverted because he basically proposed adding a subcommand to the edit command to specifically target config maps. So in the case of config map, you could specify a flag, and with that flag, you'd specify a key, and then if the key pointed to a value containing a file, then only the contents of that key would be opened in your editor, and they'd be formatted, like you'd expect in a human-friendly way. So the reason why I've added this here now is because currently we still do. So since this PR was reverted, we still do not have a way to use the edit command or anything similar to either view or edit the contents, large contents of a key on a config map. So I was hoping to get some input from the community, see if anybody had ideas or was aware of an ongoing effort that exists, perhaps, in addressing this issue. I would count this as a feature. I would probably count it as a small feature compared to the ongoing work with server-side printing and plugins. But in the long term, I think it'd be nice to begin focusing some effort into solution.
I was going to add one, like this is really, it applies to secrets equally. I think people hit this for secrets just as much as they hit it for config maps. And it probably also really applies to anything in a CRD at some point that has a slightly non-standard editing flow. So, I mean, this feels like a gap in how edit works from the perspective of edit is for humans, and if humans can't edit fields on our objects, then we need a way to do that. So the specificity of editing config maps, I think, is something it just needs to be all types that a human is going to interact with frequently, and for whatever reason, the fields aren't handled well by edit today.
That makes sense. So I guess I've added some suggestions here as well to start generating discussions and discussion. Like Clayton said, yes, I agree that it would be nice to have a generic solution for not just for config maps. Perhaps a new command could be the potential solution. We could have something that is able to edit embedded values for any object that resembles the edit command, but is separate from it. What I can do is I can open up a Google Doc, begin drafting a set of solutions, and perhaps this will generate feedback from more people. If anybody has questions, I'd love to hear.
I had a quick question on why it didn't work. It says it's a generic command and you can't add subcommands to a generic command. Seemed to be the case, but don't we do that with create?
We did that from the beginning with create. We never supported arguments on create. Edit has always supported arguments, and so we would stomp existing arguments.
I see. Because create takes the thing as a dash F.
Yeah, we never had a version of create that took arguments, ever. One, I would say too that the dual of this is it's still the dual of the edit is it's incredibly hard to actually view secret content in a reasonable way. So both describe, describe doesn't decode things opaquely, so there's literally no way other than exporting to YAML and then doing a base 64 decode. So I would put this into general usability around viewing and editing both secrets, which use by base 64 encoded fields, and config maps, which are also large, frequently edited structural data. I think we just have a gap here in it's not easy to use the CLI to work with secrets and config maps, which is the two things that most people work with.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
I still think we could do this with, I mean, it might be not the right reason for, or right decision for other reasons, but I still don't understand why we can't do this as written, just implemented differently. Like instead of doing it explicitly as a subcommand, we could just look at the arguments, right, and then dispatch different code based on if it's a config map.
I was actually thinking about maybe being able to provide, I don't know, as a parameter to edit command, the path that you want to edit from within the object. I know, and I heard from some people complaining that they would like to be able to edit only part of the specific object and not the whole object. So if we could come up with a generic way to modify only, I don't know, I want to modify just spec, because if I'm looking at my deployment, the majority of this thing that I see is a status, and I don't care about the status because I want to see just the spec or part of the spec. If we could come up with a generic way to be able to edit stuff like that, that would apply equally to secrets, config maps, or even CRDs that have embedded fields. It only would have to be smart enough to know that, oh, and this is actually a base 64 encoded stuff, so we need to decode it and present the user with already decoded data. Not sure how that.
Yeah, but the primary user that we're focusing on here is someone who's just coming to Kubernetes. Like they're going to do describe and then they're going to do edit. And if you have to explain to someone that they have to pass -- key equals whatever, it feels like we're basically kind of saying edit doesn't really work for the most commonly edited contents. So, I mean, I agree much that that's a useful feature, but I might even just go back a step and say, does any user using the CLI who sees the edit command not expect to be able to edit config maps or secrets? And like, you know, if it requires us to transform the object or whatever, like those are also things like, there's no reason that edit couldn't, for instance, convert you to string maps or just decode it for you and handle the details on the way out, as long as we can come up with a way to make it work reasonably generically, and then we could reserve the more specific key thing for more advanced / power user. I just worry here because, like, I hit this almost once a week, and I know exactly how the system works, and it still sounds stupid to me. So it's kind of like we're kind of like just punting on the problem if we do something more power user-ish.
Does in that case, since edit is problematic, does introducing a new command, I don't know, I can't think of a reasonable name, in edit, whatever, that will do just this and only this. We can't break.
Would a user really expect that? Like, if you say, hey, we have this edit command that's supposed to work, but it doesn't actually work for the two things that most commonly edit, you should go use this other command. Shouldn't we just make edit work for the things that people expect to edit for? Like, it'd be kind of like if describe for a pod didn't show you details about the pod. Like, would anybody really expect that? Like, you have to go call describe pod -- show me, you know, containers or something. I feel like, you know, what are people like? Do we know what people are editing day to day? My gut would be secrets and config maps. Config maps take the brunt, deployment to the second, and then there's a long tail of others. And could we validate that? And then if that's the case, I would kind of argue, let's fix what users care about, not what, like, you know, what we could. Adding features to fix problems with fundamental things just means we have two things that users have to understand instead of the thing working like they expect it to.
Would you then differentiate the edit intention on a config map, whether you care about modifying the entire config map or just the contents in a reasonable way?
I mean, as a user, that's a problem that edit needs to deal with. Like, I kind of, this gets to like the extensibility versus whatever. Like, if we go make a perfectly extensible system that's not useful for anyone so that like it works generically with everything, it's not very helpful. But if we said like, okay, well, secrets and config maps should be editable, there's a generic problem there which could apply to CRDs. what's the best way to fix it for the end user for config maps and secrets, and then go look at the implementation about making sure that we think about it being generic. But knowing what a user expects, I think starting off with that would be good. No, and the thing is users don't submit, like, we have create for secrets because it's too hard to build a YAML file with secrets because you have to do base 64 encoding. But having an edit secrets is basically saying, well, we have this object that's editable, but if the OpenAPI spec, for instance, needs to decorate a field a certain way, or if we see a base 64 encoded field in edit, we just automatically convert it to text and then back, or we warn users and say, hey, we tried to decode it. Like, there's a bunch of things we could do. I would worry about making users have to know the distinction when it's a pointless technical decision that most users don't care about.
Yeah, but then we still need to provide a fallback way for some that do care about modifying, because
that's a great question, and that's actually a good example of where the more specific one I think would make sense. Like, we tried to edit this, we couldn't decode the Unicode characters in your secret. You could use -- key, or that's almost a different case. That's like patch, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to set binary contents in there, you need to do something else. You're not really editing, and your text editor is not going to work with binary content most of the case. We're not going to open a hex editor or something and tell you to change the bytes one by one. So I feel like just breaking this down to use cases, does it make sense to everybody else that people just expect to be able to edit secrets in config maps, and we should focus on satisfying the expectation rather than coming up with workarounds?
I think that does make sense, that we would just unpack the data for config maps or for the secrets. What I'm worried about is, what if I get a user that is interested in editing the entire config map as is currently? I lost my thought. Because we will basically we will change the behavior of the current edit command if we introduce the fact that the config map is modifying the interior. I know what I want to say. Basically, the other fields that we have on a config map resource, there's nothing that you cannot do with other commands, because you can always annotate or label with the appropriate commands, and the actual contents is just the data field inside of both secret or a config map. So we could start with just editing this, and eventually providing a fallback opt-out flag where you would just go back to the old behavior just for the sake of, I don't know, for the sake of goodness.
Yeah, I think Juan's idea of a doc where we can kind of write out some of what we might think of as like I have some pretty strong opinions on this, because as a user, it makes me angry, right? I can't get the thing that's very natural for me to want to do done. And so I think we should use the doc as a way to flesh those out and have all the options there so people can talk about it. I think some of the concern about the original PR was it was just kind of it was a quick, I'm going to go do this hack thing, and it didn't take into account how people were actually using it, and it created something new. That's some of the comments I remember that led to it being reverted.
Remember correctly, the original entirely broke the edit command. So, but yeah, I think that's something reasonable and definitely desirable by the majority of the community to have. And I totally feel your pain, because I'm struggling with this one myself. Although I'm mostly with config maps, so that's easier than with secrets usually.
If we do have them edit the config map, we probably want to give some messaging that says, hey, this isn't going to, your pods won't get this until you kick them or something. Since if we're targeting the beginning users, that it's not always obvious to everyone that when they make a change to a config map, it doesn't get propagated.
But that's not a kubectl thing that we should be worrying about. That's a thing that is that a user should understand when working with a specific object. It's like with saying that, oh, you just modified a cron job, but you should be aware that only the next cron job, the next job that will be created, will be the one that will pick up the spec that you just modified, but not the one that is currently running. So we can't embed stuff like that within the CLI. This is a knowledge I would expect from a user to have about a specific resource that he's working with.
You know, that actually reminds me of the, like, ultimately, edit can't convey info about the schema or the structure of the objects because we don't really have a way to inject comments into the body. But, like, the argument has always been that in the OpenAPI spec is a description of what the object does. And we could certainly put the OpenAPI description of the object you're editing as a comment at the top. Because, you know, in the OpenAPI description of a deployment, I would expect in the first paragraph for it to tell me what a deployment does, and maybe in the second paragraph to tell me what happens when I change a deployment. And that's both information that a novice user might actually find value with if there was comments at the top of the edit when it came up. We had talked about inlining comments for fields. That got too complex because there's no good YAML library for it. But even conveying some generic information about the object you're editing would be useful for a first-time user.
Oh,
hey
yeah.
guys, I got to run. Oh, sorry.
No, that makes sense. That would be resembling the current flow that we have with validation. When you fail validation, the information about what failed is at the top of the file that you have open, so that you can clearly see what failed and what is that you need to fix. But that still then would require that information being presented by the server.
Yeah, it's all in the OpenAPI spec today. I mean,
okay.
And maybe another point even is to go a little bit further is people who come in and do edit may not know what fields mean. It might be useful for us in the comment at the top of edit to even go so far as to bring up the existence of kubectl explain, because kubectl explain is actually a pretty good tool to edit, which is even if we can't inline it and we can't offer a rich editing experience, we can at least tell you the command that explains all of this stuff to you.
I was about to say that we should be cautious about adding too much of data at the top, because you would end up with entire screen of comments explaining you how to use edit, and only after skipping the page, you would get the actual object that you want to edit. So suggesting kubectl explain with a short description of the resource and eventually links where you can get more data would be beneficial, because that will give both the novice users and the information they would be looking for, but only enough to learn something more, but not too much, so they are flooded with sort of useful information, but not after you're doing it like for the 10th or 100th time.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of our resource problems basically come down to, do we do a good job of helping you find out what resources there are and explaining what those resources do? And we have most of the tools for that, but we don't put them front and center in a lot of flows. And so, you know, I've certainly met people who've asked me endless questions about what objects do. And I'm like, did you ever try explain? And they're like, oh, I didn't even know that existed. And it's
and somebody just recently added the API resources command that will return what the current server provides, because for a long time we had there was no reasonable way how to get the resources, and I think Juan has a PR open so that we change the hard-coded list of resources with a suggestion, oh, and if you want to know what the resources we have, use this command. And this will free us from actually hard-coding the list of resources, because there was another proposal of getting that list from the server, but that's problematic and unnecessarily makes users lazy, doesn't allow them to learn other stuff, and provides additional burden on the commands to get those data. Cool. Are there any other comments, topics people want to bring up? I'm hearing none. Juan, can you give us an update on the printers? How's the progress on that one?
Sure. So currently there's PRs open, so in flight or close to merging, that finish wiring print flags through all commands. So hopefully by the end of this week, the latest, we will have the new print flags pattern set across all commands. As an aside, there has been also ongoing work to apply the same pattern to other flags not related to printing, such as record. So we hope to continue this pattern ultimately with any commands or any pieces of the code that require binding to flags.
And the next one that you will be working on, if I remember correctly, will be the config flags. Is that correct?
Correct. So there's right now some initial work that begins wiring all of the configuration options in the same pattern that the new print flags exercise. So the hope we have with this is that it'd be easier for us to consume config flags, but also it would be a lot easier for third-party clients, plugins, and so on to essentially be able to retrieve a REST client through a structured set of flags rather than come up with their own ways and eventually have a disparity in how third-party clients and plugins do it. Yeah, so we hope through this we can establish a firmer grip on how third-party clients and plugins talk to the API.
Awesome. Are there any other stand-ups that people wanna share?
Yeah, I was hoping to just give a quick comment on the server-side apply working group, since there's obvious overlap with SIG CLI. So we're on the fourth week the fourth sprint of the server-side apply working group. There has been several PRs that have been merged into the Kube Open API repo in order to enhance our IDL and the Swagger. And there has been a significant refactor of the patch code on the server in order to make it more testable, and so that we can have some confidence in our changes once we do add this to the patch. I think that's about all that really would be worth mentioning.
Awesome. You're doing great work with the server side apply. I'm really looking forward to that one. That should simplify the kubectl life a little bit. Are there any other updates that people want to provide? Okay, thanks very much, folks. With this, I think we can close today's meetings. I'm hoping to see some of you next week in Copenhagen, and I'll see all of you in 2 weeks in the next SIG CLI meeting. Thanks, bye.